founder and president director of Mizan Group, Haidar Bagir, sees Karen's global initiative, Charter for Compassion, as resembling the spirit of love that Islam has always stood for. Early this year, together with a number of Muslim leaders in Indonesia, Bagir called for Gerakan Islam Cinta, a movement to reclaim some of the misunderstanding of the interpretation of Islam, as well as to take real actions to have compassion between one another, regardless of one's faith or belief, especially in a pluralistic country such as Indonesia.
In this celebration, we now put Islam as a religion of love as our tagline for our celebration of our 30th birthday. Karen agreed to come. So this is really a very nice coincidence, and we hope that her visit to Jakarta would really endorse our mission to reintroduce Islam as a religion of love, since now the theme of her visit, her speech and lectures here in Jakarta, would be religion as a source of compassion for human beings.
Now, how we speak to one another, I mean, this is one of the 12 steps of compassion. Tell me a little bit about the 12 steps in terms of, you know, the practical application, and how did you come up with those 12 steps?
Well, this probably wouldn't have much resonance in a largely Muslim country, but I thought I wanted to write, because everywhere I was going around talking about compassion, people were saying, but how do we do this? How do we do this? This is all so hard.
What is compassion? I mean,
it doesn't mean feeling sorry for people. It means compathein, the word. It means to feel with another person, to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Or Rahman, it's related to the word for womb. And that brings up the idea of mother love. But a mother love is not just an emotion, it's hard work. A mother has to be responsible for that child every single moment of the day and get up every night, even if she's exhausted. And then that cute little baby grows up and can become a horrible disappointment. But still the mother doesn't give up. And there's a Buddhist prayer that says, let us cherish all creatures as a mother her only child. We have to have responsibility for all human beings and all other species, as though that same sense of responsibility. In the Buddhist tradition, compassion, karuna, it means taking responsibility for the pain of the world and realizing that that pain over there, it's my pain too as a human being. And that's very true today, because we've created a global market where we are interconnected more strongly than ever before. We can't exist without one another, so we must try and live together as kindly as we can. 12 steps, it comes from Alcoholics Anonymous. Because
to get rid of your addiction,
because I think we're often addicted to our likes and dislikes. We don't know what we do without our pet hatreds.
So the Charter for Compassion, since you started it in 2008, how is it doing now?
Well, it's been very interesting to me that people who've come forward to help me have been businessmen. And businessmen in the Middle East, in Pakistan and the United States have come forward with practical projects, because they've told me that they looked into the abyss of 2008 and realized what can happen when greed and selfishness got underway, that compassion was actually good for business as it's good for human life. And so we've developed a cities campaign where various cities around the world are affirming the Charter and declaring themselves compassionate cities, which doesn't mean that they are compassionate, but that they are going to put compassion on their agenda and try and insert the golden rule practically, realistically and creatively into the difficult realities of urban life in the 21st century. Each year the community will work on a particular project. One city is doing an environmental issue this year. Another city, Louisville in Kentucky, is concentrating on legal matters.
So you see this taking off, a compassion as practical steps, not just a good idea.
No, because I see it as an urgent global imperative. This, if we want a safe world, a just world, we have to think of other people as though as we would think of ourselves. The old selfish ways of doing are no longer viable for us. War is no longer a viable possibility with the weapons that we've created and unleashed upon ourselves. I said recently that a compassionate city should be an uncomfortable city. We should be deeply uncomfortable if there is homelessness and loneliness and poverty in our city. And indeed, anywhere in the world, a compassionate city must have a global outlook. We can't just sit back saying, if I have a nightmare for the Charter, it's that everyone will get stuck at step 3, forgiving themselves, and not move on to the last step of all, which is loving your enemies. You've just got to keep on expanding. Confucius had a very good idea. He said, you start with your family. That's where you learn how to relate to other people in family as you're growing up. And you learn to treat each other with compassion and respect. But you can't stop there. You then have to move out to your city, and then your country, and then the whole world. Now we have to acquire that global outlook.
Let me just go over the 12 steps to a compassionate life, which is, it's a practical handbook on how to.
Yes,
I mean, that's how I read it. Number 1 is you have to learn about compassion, and the second step is look at your own world. And you mentioned it's important to see the world around you and be uncomfortable if we see suffering.
And see, what can I do to make this environment a more compassionate place in my family, in the workplace, in my city, and then as a citizen of a nation. What would the world be like if we made this bit of it a bit more compassionate and generous?
And compassion for yourself.
Yes, here we go. It's very important.
I mean, some people think, okay, this is a call to maybe perhaps think more about yourself than other people.
Yes, but you must realise every single one of us has flaws. And if we're very hard on ourselves, we'll be hard with other people. And you have to say, yes, I am this deeply flawed human being. And it's very important to realise that, because some people say, well, this isn't for me, I'm just an ordinary person. Martin Luther King and Gandhi were both very flawed individuals, but look what one person can do and can achieve if they set their mind to it. So you've got to come to terms with your shadow side, the not so nice parts of yourself, and say, okay, I've got it, I'm going to try and improve, but not go on lacerating yourself about it, or you will... and your pain, acknowledge the pain that you have, because if you dismiss your own pain, you're likely to be dismissive about other people's pain too.
There's a saying that you can't love other people unless you love yourself first.
But, can't stop here having love-in sessions with yourself. Move on now to
empathy.
Just learn what you've learnt about yourself. To say, well, other people feel this too. Everybody has pain. It's the one thing that holds human beings, we all have in common.
Mindfulness, and of course many sort of religions or your spiritual life, we talk about mindfulness. Why is it important? This Buddhist practice is a very useful one. Just in a dispassionate way, not in a guilt-mongering way, watch yourself going through the day. Watch yourself how often you're impatient with people, or how often you make an irritable gesture. Then notice how if somebody smiles or does something nice for you, how it can brighten the whole day, and you can do that for somebody every day in your life. And just becoming aware of how you behave and relate to other people. The other ones, of course, is how we speak to one another. We mentioned that before. Less of the aggression and less of the being judgmental. Concern for everybody. And
that's for everybody. It's not just for the people you find congenial. because all the religious traditions insist you can't confine your compassion or your benevolence to your own particular group. You've got to have, as one Chinese said, concern for everybody, even the people you don't like.
Yeah, so the 12th step is love your enemies.
Yes.
That's quite difficult.
It's the hardest one of all, and we spend our lives doing it. But love, when Jesus spoke, that's a quotation from Jesus. He said, love, he's doing a bit of rabbinic midrash on a verse in the Hebrew Bible, which says, love your neighbor. And Jesus said, yes, love your neighbor. Also take it a step further, love your enemy. Now, the word love in Hebrew, it doesn't mean love in our sense. It doesn't mean an emotion. It's hesed. That means loyalty. And it was a term used in international treaties. Two kings would promise to love each other, and they may have been enemies before. That didn't mean they fell into one another's arms and became best friends, but that they would be loyal to one another. They would look out for one another's interests. They would have concern for their practical well-being, and make sure that everything was okay, even if it meant putting your own short-term interest to one side. Now, that's the kind of love now we have to have for our so-called enemies if we want to survive. We must try harder with this. There's one thing we have to try, all have a duty to do, is to leave the world a better place in some way because we've lived in it. And the big task of our time is surely to create a global community where people of all ethnicities and ideologies can live together in respect. And if we can't do that, then I shudder for the future of our planet.